Hello, friends, and welcome to our SBT Sunday teaching. Today's retreat day, so we've all been practicing all day long together. It is so fun. We started the day with day of observance vows, and we've been meditating and doing teachings and Sangha discussions. Of course, my name is Tenzin Tarpa, and before we begin, let's take a moment to appreciate our wonderful, kind community gathered here today. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others, dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, and to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Welcome again, everybody, to our Sunday teaching. Today we are going to be exploring the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. So, before we dig in, I wanted to set the stage, if I may, with a couple things. So, within Buddhism, happiness and suffering can be seen as representing two ends of the spectrum of the quality or experience of life. And actually, each define the other, with happiness being the absence of suffering, and suffering being the absence of happiness. Now, this is again on a spectrum. So within our day, we move throughout the spectrum from deep suffering to lighter types of suffering, to great joy, and also to mild contentment. So all human experience is somewhere on that spectrum, but it's important to understand that we have these ends, which we could call happiness at one end or pleasure, and on the other end we could call suffering. And so the Buddha himself, when asked what he taught, alluded to the same idea. And the Buddha says, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. Again, kind of highlighting the spectrum. There's suffering and the end of suffering, which of course is happiness. Um, in the story of the Buddha's life, the Buddha's born in as a the story goes as a prince, and he lives a life of luxury, but he develops the wish to find out the cause of suffering and the end of suffering. And so this is what motivates the Buddha on his spiritual journey. The answer to one question: what is the cause of our suffering? And so the Buddha spends years and years trying to find out. He studies from all the great mystics in the land. And eventually he finds the answer, which is the precursor to the Buddha achieving awakening itself. The Four Noble Truths can be seen as the Buddha's teaching on nirvana and samsara. To me, this has always been clear, though a lot of teachers don't tie the two together. And when we talk about enlightenment, let's first define what that is. So with SBT, we like to use the term awakening instead of enlightenment, and highlighting the verb aspect of the word, that we're all slowly awakening. And what it is, it's to awaken to the understanding of your true nature and the true nature of reality. We say that phrase a lot in SBT for good reason. And what we mean by that is it's awakening to the understanding of who and what you are, your relationship to others and your environment, your relationship to reality itself. So the Buddha posited two types of existence, and only two. The Buddha posited unenlightened awakening and enlightened awakening. These two modes of existence. Unenlightened existence or unawakened existence, the Buddha referred to as samsara. It's a Pali Sanskrit term. And the opposite, the Buddha referred to as nirvana. Now, it's important to understand that when we talk about samsara and nirvana, we're not talking about places or dimensions. We're not talking about heavens and hells. We're talking about qualities or aspects of the mind, states of mind, with nirvana representing clarity, liberation, and happiness, and samsara representing confusion, bondage, and suffering. So samsara is translated as silic existence. So within traditional Buddhism, asserting a belief in rebirth, and I say that because we're a secular Buddhist group, and many of our members have various beliefs. Many of our members believe certain aspects of Buddhism, others don't. So rebirth is something that oftentimes um, uh, many practitioners might not hold as a belief. Of course, traditional Buddhism does. And without a doubt, there is no doubt that the Buddha believed in rebirth. It's just written throughout the sutras. There's no doubt about it that the Buddha himself believed in rebirth. And so the idea is samsara is this cyclic existence. It's being trapped in the cycle of birth, sickness, death, and rebirth, being continuously stuck in this world. And samsara, or unawakened existence, uh, is often looked at as a state of suffering, being trapped in a state of suffering. It's problematic existence, right? Trapped in our own mental confusion, afflictions, fears, and of course, uncontrollable habits and impulses. This is the idea of samsara. Mentally, samsara is all the things we hang on to. It's our negative qualities, it's our hatred, it's our confusion, it's our immaturity, it's our selfishness. It's mainly the qualities that we're often trying to get rid of. Importantly, it's this neurotic, self-centered existence. And it arises from exaggerated views of the immediacy and importance of things, of ourselves and our experiences. Whereas nirvana is translated as extinction, to extinguish, I'm sorry, and pertaining to the extinguishing of what Buddhism calls the three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Ignorance is defined as a state of not knowing, knowing the wrong thing, or not wanting to know. I'm always fascinated by the last one, a state of not wanting to know the truth about life, right? Ignorance mainly is pertaining to, again, the true nature of ourselves in reality. either not knowing what that is, having a wrong view of that, or simply not caring, wanting to be an ostrich, sticking your head in the sand and just ignoring all your problems. Nirvana is awakened or enlightened existence, a state or quality of the mind attained by those who have transcended their afflictions and limitations, through which they apprehend the true nature of themselves and reality. When the Buddha was asked to define nirvana in the early sutras, he refused to give a big lengthy answer. Instead, he simply said, nirvana is the end of suffering. So again, we come back to the spectrum with suffering at one end, happiness at the other. Now, happiness could include happiness, maybe higher states of joy, nirvana, enlightenment. It's that whole direction towards liberation. And again, the Buddha says, what do you teach? The Buddha answers, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. I teach samsara and nirvana. So, with that said, you have a little bit of understanding of the Buddha's model of the nature of reality. So the Four Noble Truths are considered to be the first of the Buddha's great teachings after he reaches enlightenment, and by far his most famous discourse. This is usually the first teaching that you would go to in Buddhist communities. And it's said that all of the Buddha's teachings fit into the Four Noble Truths, that the Four Noble Truths are the framework for all Buddhist thought. In one way or another, they always come back. The Four Noble Truths, to understand them properly, you have to take them from a basis that we're not looking at life from a surface level examination. We're looking at life from the subtlest and most profound level of analysis. And at the same time, when we're looking at these teachings, we shouldn't see them merely from the context of our own lives, but rather in the bigger picture of the context of sentient existence as a whole, as existence as a whole. Okay, I've set it up, I think, properly. Let's get on to the Four Noble Truths. So, these are the Four Noble Truths. The first is the truth of suffering. The second is the truth of the cause of suffering. The third is the truth of the cessation or ending of suffering. And four is the truth of the path leading to the ending of suffering. The first noble truth asserts that unenlightened existence, samsara, is pervaded by suffering. And that includes physical, emotional, or mental suffering and pain. Physical, pretty obvious. Well, when you break a leg, you have a toothache, you're living in terrible circumstances. There's a lot of physical pain in the world. Famine. Emotional pain is also quite obvious to us, right? That can be jealousy, that can be the loss of a loved one, envy, anxiety. Well, anxiety is more of a mental pain, but there's no end to our emotional pain, anger. And then mental pain, which can be mental suffering, can be anything from confusion, anxiety, feelings of insecurity and fear, and also just simply the dissatisfying nature of the mind. That for many of us, often no matter how much we get or what we get, it's often not enough, or it's not the way we want it to be. It's not quite the way things be. Everything needs to be improved. We just tend to have a dissatisfied attitude towards life itself. According to the sutras, the Buddha's talking about, when he talks about suffering, he's talking about, first of all, birth, aging, illness or injury, and death. He's talking about subtler forms like a union of what is displeasing and the separation for what is pleasing, meaning getting what you want or getting what you not getting what you want or getting what you don't want. And separation from uh, a separation from what is pleasing. Um, so the spectrum again is a spectrum between suffering and happiness. Uh, this first truth doesn't refute the fact that we have happiness in our lives. Buddhism never refutes that fact. Of course, we have happiness in our lives, but Buddhism asserts that between all of that, life is problematic. We have moments of happiness, but of course, we're always falling back into suffering and pain. It's a daily aspect of life. Now, when we talk about this spectrum of suffering and happiness, let's look at the spectrum of suffering itself. So, of course, at one end we have really bad suffering, breaking a bone, going to jail, being addicted to substances. There's endless examples of the suffering that we deal with, living in a place of war. But then the Buddha also applied that even these subtle things are also aspects of suffering. Um, Simply, the subtlest I'm thinking of is silly things like getting stuck in traffic. Now you might say, well, that's not much suffering, but I don't know. It can really be a suffering sometimes. Or how about driving in the car and your spouse won't stop singing to the radio? I mean, there's some real subtle sufferings that we all deal with. Yes. And so the Buddha saw all of these as this realm of suffering, and most of them are mental, and a great deal of them are created by ourselves. That they're not A great deal of our suffering isn't physical or material, but psychological in nature. And this is the part of the Buddhism is really trying to work towards, is trying to come to terms with this psychological suffering. The physical suffering, there's not much we can do about. We own bodies and we own minds. We own these bodies. These bodies are prone to illness and injury, and eventually we'll get sick, grow old, and die. There's no way around that. Owning these minds of ours, our minds are just big troublemakers, aren't they? They create all kinds of problems for us. Emotions come up. We're not in control of our thoughts. We have negative thinking that plagues us. How much of each day are you really free of all of these things? How much of the day do you find peace of mind? Right? The second noble truth talks about the cause of suffering, the truth of the cause. And, or we could say the cause of samsara, right? The cause of unenlightened existence, which is suffering. So the Buddha claims that the immediate cause of our suffering is our desire and craving. And they translate it from Pali as thirst, like really needing things. And it's this It's our obsessive pursuit and attachment to what we want, and equally our aversion to what we don't want. This is a big motivator in our lives. And then our delight, our seeking out sensual pleasure and experiences, us being obsessed with sensual pleasures and experiences. So, on a deeper level, desires and craving have their own source. So, on a deeper level, those arise from, again, coming back to this idea of ignorance. When we don't understand the true nature of ourselves and reality, we tend to seek out happiness in a lot of wrong places. And we tend to try to hide from our fears, from our worries, by losing ourselves in our desires and our cravings, our wants. So ultimately, the reason we suffer is simply because we don't understand who we are and the nature of reality. We don't understand how life works. We don't understand our role in it. We don't understand how to get along with others very well. We don't understand our minds. And the third noble truth talks about the truth of the cessation or ending of suffering. Now, the third noble truth is simple. It's about the attainment of nirvana. It's an assurance from the Buddha that liberation from suffering is indeed possible. This is the third noble truth, that cessation of suffering is possible. Now, to what degree is a question. Often people will have conversations about, well, Buddhism says they're searching to they're working towards transcending all suffering. And I think to a lot of people that sounds a bit impossible. They can't imagine living a life of no suffering. But you have to understand in this context. So first of all, again, it's a spectrum. Suffering is a spectrum. So it's not a question, it's not a light switch whether we suffer or not. The fact is, as we practice and as we begin to understand ourselves, we understand life, we suffer less. It's very simple. From the time I began Buddhism till now, I suffer so much less. Even physical injury and sickness, I'm better at accepting it and working with it. And then mental afflictions, mental suffering, I rarely have problems anymore. I don't have deep problems anymore. I've transcended them so much. So the idea is that we move on this progression. It's incremental. We slowly start to feel and experience less and less suffering. So we experience less suffering, and more importantly, at a far less intensity. Now, as far as Buddhists claim that we can transcend all suffering, there's kind of a catch to that. So the Buddha achieved enlightenment in his lifetime, but the Buddha still suffered in his lifetime. There are stories of when he was older and his body was getting old. He lived to 80. His body was getting old. He compared his body in his old age to a cart held together by straps and ropes. And clearly, as he died, the Buddha suffered. So he wasn't free of suffering at this point. But the traditional take is that upon the Buddha's death, which is called parinirvana, the Buddha is no longer reborn. He escapes the cycle of rebirth. meaning he's not reborn again. He doesn't again receive a body and mind, because just owning a body and mind are a form of suffering. The body will always suffer, like we said. It is prone to illness and injury. You can't get away from that. The mind is prone to a lot of suffering, a lot of affliction. So the idea is that to be completely free of suffering is to become a Buddha, to escape the cycle of rebirth, and to not be reborn in a physical body with a human mind. And that's up to each one of you to figure out if you believe that or not. In SBT, we don't tell people what to believe, what to do, or what to think. We leave that to you. We share the Buddha's teachings, and we let you decide for yourself what you believe. We believe a belief itself is a personal thing. It's not something that should be dictated. Okay, so you have a little idea of the three truths. Now let's get into the fourth noble truth. And this is the truth of the path leading to the ending of suffering. This is prescribed path and method for transcending samsara and thereby ending nirvana. Pretty cool. Let's put up a different slide for you. These are the Noble Eightfold Path. They say, why are they all these so noble? And the idea is that they're truths known by a noble person. And a noble person is a awakened being or a highly realized practitioner. That these are truths that become apparent for people that have really put some effort in and examined life, examined themselves. They become self-evident. Of the Eightfold Path, we have right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. The term right here is it's related to correct or proper. And I've heard people that say they don't like the idea of right, that it means right and wrong. But according to the Buddha, that's exactly what it means. According to the Buddha, there was correct. When we talk about view in the first, we're talking about perspective, I'm sorry. Right perspective. Perspective is the way you understand the world, the way you it's your personal model of reality. And according to the Buddha, there was simply right perspectives of life and wrong ones. He was very clear about that. So here we're talking about correct, corresponding with the Buddhist path, of course. So right view is the most important of all of them. Right view is the goal in Buddhism. Right view can be seen as synonymous with awakening itself. The right view is accurately understanding the true nature of ourselves and reality. I sound like a broken record, but we do talk about that a lot. In a lot of times they'll say right is having the proper understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Because of course the Four Noble Truths represent the Buddhist model of reality. So right view is the right perspective. You figured it out. You understand to a certain degree who you are, what you are, how you exist, how you your relationship to others and the environment and reality. Right intention is the planning behind the things we do. And some of the intentions are that they claim are renunciation, benevolence, and compassion, but we're just talking about we're talking about awakened intentions, benevolent, beautiful intentions. Renunciation is an interesting word. So renunciation, of course, it's the idea of giving up, both in English and Tibetan. But the Tibetans had a interesting take on it, and I always liked it. The best translation I heard was renunciation is the wish for freedom. And what they're really saying, it's to renounce samsara. It's to understand the suffering nature of samsara. And by the way, we're all in samsara right now, everybody. Samsara is the common state that we all exist in. And only these wonderful great bodhisattvas and Buddhas are escaping it. But it's incremental. There's moments that I escape it more than other moments. So renunciation is to see samsara for what it is and to say to yourself, you know what? I'm starting to see how my mind drags me around every day and robs me of my dignity and robs me of my free will um, I've had enough of it. I want freedom from samsara. Benevolence, of course, is just all our wonderful good qualities. And compassion is an aspect of benevolence, but often mentioned separately in Buddhism. Number three is right speech. So a lot of these aspects of the Eightfold Path are just related to how we engage with life. So right speech is avoiding lying, slander, gossip, harsh speech, idle chatter, and abusive language. And remember, this Eightfold Path are 8 things that throughout our day we try to abide by. Number four is right action, ethical or virtuous behavior that conforms to the Buddha's teachings. So much of this is just about being a good person, isn't it? And all the religions agree on these aspects, don't they? Number five is right livelihood, and I often think that they should call it right lifestyle because Westerners would understand it more. Because and it's defined as avoiding work that directly or indirectly harms sentient beings. But right livelihood is more than a job or a career. It's more than what you do for work. And that's why I think it should be called right lifestyle, because it's about all the things you do to acquire the things you need for living. It means, and again, doing it in a virtuous way. It means not cheating the market guy, not trying to coerce people to get the things you want. So all of the things in your life, no matter what it is that you need to sustain your life, it's about going about acquiring those in a virtuous way, and that includes your job. Traditionally, they would say things like, if you're a butcher, that's not right livelihood. Um, and if you worked for a military complex nowadays, I'm not sure how that would be, right? I mean, it in one way, those bombs directly harm others, but in another way, um, are you also protecting people? So some of the intentions behind these you have to look at kind of closely. Number six is right effort, which we talked about earlier today. And it's about applying proper exertion in our practice. Now, the next three, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, in the Theravada tradition, they distinctly apply to meditation. The Mahayana tradition sees them as applying to all the things in our lives. And I'd like the Mahayana take to be personal, to be so the when we talk about right effort, applying proper exertion in our practice of meditation, right? Um, I'll explain it first through the Theravada. And with SBT, we're talking about a soft, gentle, joyful effort. This doesn't have to be a tough, hard effort. Number seven, right mindfulness. This mindfulness has to do with the way you focus and you use your awareness. And it's to focus properly and fully upon our object of meditation, which is usually our breath. And then number eight is right concentration. You could say right samadhi, which would be the Pali term, or we often say in SBT, we say right awareness, gaining meditative stability, free of laxity and excitement. So these last three, right effort, to have a proper focus, it takes a little bit of effort, right? To keep your mind focused on your breath, it requires some effort. From that, you develop a strong mindfulness that can stay focused on the object. And through that, this meditative awareness and these higher mental states are achieved. Now, 6, 7, and 8, as you can imagine, they can apply to all the practices we do, right? They could apply to our mindfulness practice as we're going about our day, as we're going to work, as we're shopping, to keep a certain amount of effort on our minds so we can hold that mindfulness and then enjoy the resultant uh, awareness that comes from it, of being present, abiding in stillness. So those are the Eightfold Path. Now I have something I want you to think about. That's the Four Noble Truths. But I always have this idea, and I'm curious what you think. To me, a very easy way to grasp the Four Noble Truths is to realize their essence is the first noble truth, that the truth of suffering. It's that it's the existence of samsara, right? The first noble truth, the truth of suffering, is that samsara is suffering. So the first noble truth tells us that samsara exists. The second noble truth tells us the cause of samsara. We talk about the cause of suffering, but all that suffering is contained within samsara itself. Number three, the truth of the cessation of suffering is the existence of nirvana. That there is a state of mind, a quality of mind that can be relatively free of suffering. And the fourth, the cause, the path leading to the cessation of suffering is the cause of nirvana. Now, sometimes I get in trouble with the last one because many traditions have the belief that nirvana doesn't have a cause, that nirvana is actually our true nature, our true natural state. And all we're doing is uncovering nirvana. Nirvana isn't created, it's uncovered. But I always had a problem with that philosophy. It never rang true to me. And the point being, if I have to do all this work to get it, and it's a bit of work, as you all know. Follow the Eightfold Path. You got to do this, meditate. Man, it seems to me like there's a lot of work involved, which means there's a cause to it. So, anyways, I just wanted to share that. So, to me, this is the easiest way to understand the Four Noble Truths: the existence of samsara, the cause of samsara, the existence of nirvana, and the cause of nirvana. Does anyone have any questions? That was a lot to take in. What do you guys think? That's a big topic. And all the hands fly in the air. Miss Wangmo.
Could you repeat again what the three poisons are?
Ignorance, attachment, and aversion.
Thank you.
Pasan.
Yes, is samsara and dukkha the same thing?
No, dukkha means suffering.
Yeah.
So that's dukkha's a Pali word, and it just means suffering. So dukkha is the nature of samsara.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. David.
If craving's the cause of all dukkha, what's happened to greed and delusion.
Well, actually, we can go farther. The three poisons can be taken to the five poisons, which I think are ignorance, attachment, aversions, greed, and passion, if I'm not mistaken. So the three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aversion, they represent all the afflictions. Ultimately, a Buddha is a person considered to be a being with no afflictions. So all the afflictions are kind of tied into it. Or you could say that ignorance is the source of all afflictions, and the major afflictions are attachment and aversion. And so in the traditional sutra, the Buddha says that that suffering is caused by desire, attachment, grasping. But later philosophical treatise clearly asserts, well, there's a cause to those as well. Desire has a cause, and that it goes much deeper than that. So the traditions posit that the Buddha was sharing that to a specific audience in a way that they could understand it. Sorry about the sun, it keeps coming in through the blinds. I put up a curtain, but it still didn't work.
So if we now say there's a deeper deeper meaning, that illusion actually is the root cause, should we pay much attention to the interpretation of the second noble truth that craving's the root cause?
Yes, it's accurate. There's no doubt about it. It's just the idea that that thought can be taken further. It's true that desire and attachment, grasping, that thirst we have for things in life, really is the cause of our suffering. That is not the root cause, but it is the main cause. It arises from ignorance, but that really is why we suffer. And for a while, the Mahayana don't share that in the Four Noble Truths. They don't talk about desire and attachment. Let me try to fix this. They just explain it right as ignorance. And what I found myself is that I think that by doing so, the practitioners were ignoring how important acknowledging desire and attachment as a form of suffering. And so I decided in our presentation that I wanted to acknowledge both, because it can't be denied that desire and aversion that we have to the world, that nothing's ever quite right. That really is the first initial cause of suffering itself. And let me know if you think that that's a good approach. We're right now currently writing our own SPT text on this and many other Buddhist topics. It's going to be called Secular Buddhist Basics. And so we're trying out the material on all you guinea pigs, all you lab rats. So let us know if you like it. Any other questions, comments? Do you recognize the many layers of suffering within your life? Yes, Darcy.
Yeah. So I just thought about this. Where do you draw the line between desire and need? Where is that line? Because, I mean, in my own thing, it's like I need to find a place that works with my abilities and disabilities, right?
Yeah.
But I sometimes feel like I should be happy with what I have and just deal with it. But yet, there's like a line there, and I sometimes feel like I'm crossing into desiring something that I should not do. But so is there like this fine line between the two?
There is. I think it comes back to that Pali word thirst, this
Okay.
this obsessive desire. We're
Okay.
not talking about just needing things like some food, a new couch. We're talking more about our obsessive desires. Yeah, these
Yeah.
uncontrollable desires. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
it has to do with intention, and it has to do with the fuel behind those, which we talked about in previous classes. That we have a virtuous fuel that we can use to fuel our activities, and then there's a non-virtuous fuel that arises from fear, from wanting to be important.
Okay, so you
So a lot
just
of it,
really have to, if you have a question of whether you're doing that out of something that's more dukkha, then you have to really just kind of examine that.
yeah, you have to examine your own intentions.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
The Buddha never mentions that needing things leads to suffering. It's always about that desire, that thirst, the hunger for more, the hunger for better, the hunger for importance, gratification, lust, right? Yeah, you're welcome. Do you believe it's possible to transcend suffering? So this is a premise in Buddhism that people often have trouble with. What do you think of that? So this is the third noble truth, right? The Buddha says it's possible to transcend suffering. You're not stuck with it. You're not trapped in samsara. Darcy?
I was agreeing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I feel like I have quite a bit.
Yeah, that's another great question. How many people here believe that they've transcended quite a bit of their suffering through their
I
Buddhist
do.
practice? Wow, look at all the hands. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that I suffer so much less. And what do we suffer? What are we liberated from? Like overreactivity, right? What else? Anybody?
Being like obsessed with it.
Obsession?
You just we're hyper focused on our pain or hyper focused on a problem.
It's you ain't kidding. And
Holding
needing,
on to it
right?
after.
Holding on to it after. Yeah. How many times do we have a simple problem? Somebody insults us, and boy, for days we're miserable, right? Yeah. Lovejoy?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, just spinning this storyline. The thing has happened, and then it's you spin
A
this
great
storyline
deal
around
ours.
it, make it
Yeah.
enormous, and yeah.
There's that great line that most of the problems we have are only thoughts. Yeah. By the way, I wanted to also share that I'm gonna do a teaching on suffering itself and define that a little bit more in the future. Today, I wanted to give an overall view of the Four Noble Truths, and I want to talk about how we cultivate that. So that was important. Brian, one more. Brian?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say I find myself having the same mental problems arise, but I'm able to kind of let them go more quickly. Let them go. And I also just wanted to share, Tarpa, like your insight, your teaching about right effort was a real insight for me as far as being able to use that, the Mahayana tradition, using that with all the Eightfold Path as opposed to just meditation was a great insight for me as opposed to just using it to avoid unwholesome thoughts and develop
Yeah.
wholesome thoughts,
Yeah.
but just applying it to everything. That's hugely helpful for me. So
Yeah, and
thank you for that.
life itself requires effort. And if you're on the Buddhist path, it requires virtuous effort in everything we do. Okay, I'd like to quickly get to this last part. I hope I have enough time. So it's great to understand the Four Noble Truths, but it's more important to actually be able to cultivate them. So we begin to cultivate the Four Noble Truths through study, contemplation, meditation, what we call the three great objectives. And once a general understanding is achieved, we then can apply our knowledge to trying to directly realize the truths, to have an experiential experience of them. So the Buddha came up with four unique tasks, one for each of the truths. These are called the four tasks, and I have them for you. I have a slide for everything. Slide master. These are the four tasks. Sufferings are to be known, their causes are to be abandoned, their cessation is to be actualized, the Eightfold Path is to be relied upon. This is how we cultivate the Four Noble Truths. Sufferings are to be known. We study about them. Now, not just book study, but examining our own lives through introspection, looking at our own suffering, looking at our ability to transcend those, right? Our own experience. Then the causes are to be abandoned. So understanding suffering is also understanding their causes and getting to the point where we can slowly start abandoning or transcending that ignorance, that attachment, that aversion, those afflictions. Number three is their cessation is to be actualized, which means actually achieving nirvana or achieving a level of awakening. And the Eightfold Path is to be relied upon, right? So through understanding suffering and relying upon the Eightfold Path, we're able to slowly start to transcend the causes of samsara. And that's all we have to do to reach nirvana, right? If samsara and nirvana are on the same spectrum, then transcending suffering is gaining happiness, gaining nirvana. So that's the Buddhist path. Let's see what else I got for you. Let's take a look at this. I have another slide for you. I think I do. Oh, here we go. This is how we cultivate the threefold path. So, this is how we cultivate the eightfold path. I'm sorry. We all have studied the threefold path as part of everyone's training. The threefold path, as I mentioned previously, is the development of higher virtue, the development of higher understanding, and the development of higher awareness. Well, the Eightfold Path fit neatly right into the Threefold Path. And to me, the Threefold Path is easier to remember, and just generally, I find it to be easier to work with. The development of higher virtue is cultivating and holding vows of awakened behavior, and it's just generally being a good person, striving to benefit others. All are benevolent, beautiful qualities. The development of higher understanding, and understanding here is like wisdom and insight. We do this through study, contemplation, and meditation on the Four Noble Truths and the nature of reality. Remember, it's not just book study, it's also real life experience, experiential. And we learn so much from our experiences. And again, this is just understanding life. And the development of higher awareness is cultivating higher mental and meditative states through meditation, mindfulness, and various practices. Again, the word higher in these three cases means that we're not talking about developing everyday virtue, everyday understanding, or everyday awakening. Most of us already have that. We're talking about awakened levels of this practice. And of course, this is aspirational. It's going to take us a while to get there. But we're talking about, we're aiming towards a level of great, great practitioners, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, right? So the development of higher virtue is just what it sounds like. It's about cultivating our benevolent qualities, being wonderful, beautiful people. The Development of higher understanding is understanding ourselves, our environment, how we interact with others and reality. And the development of higher awareness is literally developing a higher awareness, being more aware of what's happening around us, being more aware of our own actions, getting out of auto mode, right? Autopilot, where we just go through life doing what we always have, doing what we think we're supposed to, developing a great clarity, a brilliant mind, a brilliant awareness. So that's how we cultivate the Eightfold Path. Okay. What else do I got to share with you? Does anybody have any questions about that? What do you guys think about the Threefold Path? Yes, Miss Ludrom.
I just love it. I find it so clear, and yeah, it's just wonderful. As I was, I've read it a number of times now, and every time I'm like, just new little light bulbs come on or something. It's I think it's fabulous how it's kind of divided into those three sections. It's really accessible. It's very clear. Yeah, thank
Wonderful.
you.
And it seems for most people, the simpler we can make it, the clearer we make it. And like we talked about today, clarity is the real secret to practice. When you understand things clearly, you can practice well. Yeah, good. I agree with you as well. The threefold path is wonderful. Okay, I'm running a little long, so if there's no more questions, in conclusion, today we talked about that all experience is contained within the spectrum of suffering and happiness. All human experience, in one way or another, is somewhere on that spectrum between suffering and happiness. We like to use a lot of different words for what suffering or what happiness is, but that's the spectrum. We learned about the qualities or mental states of nirvana and samsara, with samsara representing a life of suffering and nirvana representing freedom from that suffering. We explained the Four Noble Truths, and we shared the various methods for cultivating the Four Noble Truths, including the four tasks and the Eightfold Path. So for any of you that want to study these a bit more or would like to engage in practicing them, we have a study guide on our website. So when people take refuge in Buddhism with SBT, and refuge is your first vows, your first commitment to practice and training in Buddhism. You're given 10 vows, 10 precepts to uphold, and you're given some study and practice commitments. So for SBT, the study and practice commitments are studying the Four Noble Truths. They're practicing the four tasks and practicing the Eightfold Path as well. So if anybody would like to study more about these or start practicing them, please download the Refuge Level Practice Guide, which Lobjang is holding up right now. Download it off our website. All of our material is free, and anyone can download it. And towards the back of the text has presentations on all these and practices for all of these, so you can dig in right away and start practicing. So with that said, why don't we end today's teaching with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks everybody for coming. Our next event, and remember this is our retreat day, and I don't have our next event. Our next event is in about 30 minutes. Am I right, Choki? Yeah, our next event is in 30 minutes. It's our vow ceremony. We have 4 people who are taking refuge vows today, as I talked about earlier. The ceremony is open to all. It's a beautiful ceremony. You can learn a lot more about taking refuge by attending. So I hope you can all make it back. And we'll see you then. Bye-bye, everybody.